Hello and welcome to the Behavioural Innovation Lab of the Policy Innovation Center. And we're excited to be having this wonderful session today. We're talking about the efforts on behavioral insights for anti-corruption over the past few while, and we are going to have in focus the upcoming BiNTA Fellowship, that is Behavioral Insights Network Transparency and Accountability Fellowship. Femi Obidare is my name. I'm Program Officer at Policy Innovation Center, and with me here is Akinwunmi Akinola, Senior Research Specialist for the Policy Innovation Center. So let's get right into the conversation. How are you, Mr. Akin?
I'm doing fine.
Very well. So let's start from this point. What's your assessment of anti-corruption initiatives in Nigeria generally? And are there any striking gaps that you observe?
Okay, thank you, Femi. Anti-corruption in Nigeria, even though a lot of people kind of refrain from using the the term fight and war and all of that. Yeah. But I think the struggle or the efforts, towards countering corruption in Nigeria has been rich, but has not been sufficient. And of course, as evidenced by indices in terms of all the indices from Transparency International, and what have you, is speaking right to the fact that we are not improving significantly. We can't deny the fact that there has been some beautiful efforts and giant strides, but they are not sufficient compared to the enormity of challenge of corruption that we have in Nigeria. To mention a few, there are a few strategies that have been put in place by government and by the coalition of civil society actors. You have the Open Government Partnership, for instance, that is supposed to promote transparency and accountability, and the open contracting system. But even with that, what's the level of reporting? And what's the performance of some of these channels and platforms? And that begs the question of policy and strategy. That every policy should be followed by a strategy for implementation, and the strategy should also be backed up with funds and with all the resources that are needed for the throughput of that work.
That's a very important angle you put out there, that from policy to strategy for implementation, and then funds to ensure that indeed whatever strategies or whatever policies being put forward are actually followed through adequately. Profound points you mentioned there. Now, can you tell us a bit about the PIC's Behavioural Innovation Lab and what have been the recent efforts of the BI Lab on BI for anti-corruption?
Beautiful. The Behavioural Innovation Lab is Policy Innovation Center's flagship center for using lessons from behavioral science to innovate, improve products and services. And this does not exclude policy when I say product and services, but the Behavioral Innovation Lab basically was conceptualized as a go-to place to incubate and innovate ideas and help use those ideas to solve, to create social solutions to social problems. That might spread to policy or programs or even services. We are relatively new. However, we've done some significant work in a short time of existence in Nigeria. The PIC, that's the pre-launch PIC, which was like the test case or the what you call the what I call the first phase of PIC, like proof of concept of PIC, actually was very instrumental in the rollout of the Nigerian social investment programs. And we did a lot of work around testing some behavioral messaging, particularly in loan repayment behaviors and all of that, factoring behavioral science components in the design, the rollout and implementation of the NSIP, that's the Nigerian Social Investment Programs. And that really gave us a good evidence as a good way to start the belief work that we're doing in Nigeria. But after post that first phase, after the launch of the BIL itself, we've been involved in certain beautiful work. For instance, in the private sector, we've supported things around financial inclusion, promoting financial inclusion, particularly using the banking services as an entry point. And to that extent, we've been able to work with some organizations in developing and embedding behavioral science in curriculum that teaches how behavioral science can be applied to financial service provision to improve uptake of financial services. And beyond that, we're also working with a couple of organizations with respect to promoting financial inclusion, talking about NIN enrollment, and then up to the end of the value chain, which is digital financial services uptake. So we're doing a bit with regards to that in private sector. In the public sector, we are very big about capacity strengthening. As a matter of fact, one of our critical goals is to be able to transfer capacity to innovate behaviorally, to create behaviorally informed innovations within our first 2 to 3 years of operation. And to a large extent, we've done that. We started by training state and non-state actors on specific behavioral insights models, from behavioral insights to inform public policy, to behavioral ethics, to the subject matter experts who even work around corruption. Some of them don't even know how this behavioral science is applied to it. So we've had a convergence of these guys together in a 4-day training, for instance, and grooming them, equipping them with skills to really apply behavioral science to their work. And it was quite rich, useful data, great feedback, fantastic, both didactic and interactional lecture. We have beautiful feedbacks from that. And we've had people from that cohort, particularly because that was the first cohort, people from that cohort opening doors for us to come and do some sort of partnerships, whether with ministries, departments, and agencies, or with their organization in the kind of anti-corruption work that they do. So we have this pocket of support that we're providing for these state and non-state actors.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, from your position as a subject matter expert in behavioral insights, what would you say are the prospects for BI in tackling corruption in Nigeria? What are the prospects?
Wow. The prospects are huge. They are huge in the sense that behavioral insight in itself is multidisciplinary, as you know, which means that it can be applied and it draws its foundation and roots from different disciplines. And that makes it very unique in the sense that the people who are behind policy designs usually lack that multidisciplinary skill. And that itself gives you that unique angle to see things from a very holistic view. So for instance, if you take it from the legal point of view, if you have a legal background and you think that legislation is the most appropriate route to, in quote, control people's behavior, you'll be shocked at the kind of response that will elicit from the citizenry. Whereas somebody from multidisciplinary field like behavioral science will tell you that you didn't factor in human angle and human-centered design in creating or drafting this policy.
These policies,
And so to that extent, there's a lot of potential, particularly for testing and trialing policies. But before even trialing them, in the entire design of it, co-creation, there has to be that multidisciplinary approach to how you see policies and how you draft policies. And that's a big gap in what we have or what we see in the process of policy making in Nigeria right now. You just have, I recall an incident we had with somebody where the person was recanting how policies were made well, this was at subnational level, and the person that and the question was posed to him like, okay, so how did you come about this policy? The person said, oh, the commissioner just had a 2-day retreat in the hotel, came up with some policy document, and that was binding.
Wow.
Suffice to say, that's not the best way or best approach to. Yes, you could take that as a fresh start, like you are getting your hands dirty in it, but there's a much more process that should be followed, and we have that 4-phase process that we go through in creating solutions within the Behavioural Innovation Lab. We start with the diagnostics. We don't just assume, because every decision you make, it will be faulty to build your decision on assumptions. And those assumptions have to be tested, even when you have read them to have worked in other settings, from literature, or your gut feeling, or your what you call anecdote supports that position or that decision. You still want to go through rigorous diagnostic work to look at it from all the angles and synthesize what does data say or speak to regarding this. And then from that diagnostic, we go through, after synthesizing the evidence from that diagnostic, we now go through a process of co-creation, which means that you want to draw insights from that data that you have collected, and that's where the beauty of the multidisciplinary angle comes in, because then in that co-creation you have a diversity of audience or a diversity of skills all brought to the table, and that's where they bring in their different unique expertise to say, no, this does not work this way. You imagine you bring in a market woman who, for instance, knows how products go, whether shelf life and all of that, irrespective of your theory, maybe from product design. But the market woman knows what we sell and what we not sell. She knows they have a thinking of a usual customer. She knows the customer avatar. She can speak specifically to that. Or you now even go deeper and you now do user surveys, which means that you are bringing the potential users of that product or that service, or the potential beneficiary of that policy. You bring them to the room, and you not for NUC, NLC, not for unionism, as many people, there's this tokenistic idea that once the definition of carrying people along in policy making is just to invite them to the room and they eat and go. That's not what we are saying. We are saying they are bringing valuable insights from real life experience that benefits the design and the architecture behind how you come about that policy, product, or service. And that's the beauty of co-creation. And then from co-creation, we now go to the third phase, which has to do with testing, which means that when you co-create whatever product or policy, you don't just roll out a policy because it could have very massive, deleterious, harmful impact on your public. And so you test at a micro scale, right? Or at a micro level, and the outcome and the feedback of that will help you to also iterate to see where you need to tidy the loose ends before you can now scale. And that's the entire value chain of the process that we go through in the Behavioural Innovation Lab.
That's brilliant. So from diagnostics to co-creating to testing and then scaling. Very fantastic. Now let's move on to one of your most recent initiatives, that is the Behavioural Insight Network Transparency and Accountability Fellowship, BiNTA Fellowship for short. So what are the objectives of the BiNTA Fellowship?
Thank you, Femi. The first objective of the BiNTA Fellowship is capacity strengthening. As previously identified, we don't have a lot of that expertise here in Nigeria. And like I said, we have a critical goal of being able to transfer this capacity in our first 2 to 3 years of work in Nigeria, to various critical stakeholders in state and non-state spaces. And so our first objective of the BiNTA Fellowship is to democratize opportunities for capacity strengthening. We want an average man who has a very beautiful idea, innovative ideas around solving corruption problems, but lacks the opportunity to express him or herself. We want that person to feel a place, to find a place where his or her ideas can be innovated or incubated. You can bounce ideas off, and much more importantly, we can nest in our skills and expertise in behavioral insights to improve the outcomes and outputs of the ideas that you're trying to create through the entire four-stage process that I've explained much earlier. So that the first objective is to transfer that capacity to as many people as possible. And in doing that, you also need to democratize that learning opportunity, which all of them tie into that one bucket of capacity strengthening. That is one. The second one is the fact that we need a lot of hiding. We don't know it all too. Right. So we need a lot of innovations and beautiful. We don't want situations where people have ideas and their ideas die with them. And so to that extent, we are creating a platform for convergence of ideas that can help us solve our problems.
Fantastic.
So to that extent, our second objective is to be able to iterate non-conventional ways to solve Nigeria's corruption problem. And we are very big on that. We are tired of the rhetorics and things that do not work that we bandy around as an intervention. And we really are very interested in how we can innovate. Your bit, my bit, when you come together, there's a theory called the theory of collective action, right? And when you come together and you're able to synthesize the best of ideas amidst of plenty, you cannot but get the best use of those ideas because they are coming from different people, and it's a well thought through process. So we're looking at that as a second objective. The third objective is also to foster engagement. Right. So you cannot put in all of the mechanisms, strategies, policies without people to engage the entire system, irrespective of what you have designed. So we need people also to engage. Imagine if I say I want to support a subnational government to sanitize their procurement process, and I want to nest in behavioral insights into that entire process. Do I have the human resource to be able to engage that entire process? And that is one of our critical goals for creating BiNTA Fellowship.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Now, one quick question is this. So who is eligible? Very straightforward.
Okay, so if you are very innovative, you have worked around anti-corruption reforms before, you have insights from behavioral science, or you have basic ideas around how behavioral science or anti-corruption work, you are eligible. Literally, you are eligible if you are, maybe I should say what disqualifies you: if you've been involved in a corrupt practice or probably you've been convicted by that before, you are not eligible, because that is not just a strain or tear on the entire process. It's there's a conflict of interest, when you are that kind of person. So we're looking for people not who are perfect, but people who can follow through the path philosophically. And if you don't belong to that category, you are eligible if you have insights, you have ideas to solve the corruption problems that we have in Nigeria. You are eligible.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And one very important question I know around every form of initiative is sustainability. So the question here would be that what happens after completion of the fellowship? I know the fellowship lasts about 6 months thereabout. So what happens right after that for the fellows?
So the fellows are going to, we're not leaving them stranded. We are going to, the entire process, like I said earlier on, is even a hand-holding process, which means that they have coaching calls, they have webinars, and a lot of learning sessions through the entire process. As a matter of fact, one of the key things that they are going to do in their onboarding process is to go through their online learning management system, where they get to engage with specific behavioral insight principles as it applies specifically to anti-corruption reform. But beyond that, we also, don't forget, we said our third critical goal is for engagement. And so post the fellowship, we want to keep the engagements going, which means that we will co-opt them or invite them to join a community of a burgeoning community of practice.
Fantastic.
Of behavioral insight practitioners in Nigeria.
Beautiful.
And that you can just imagine a lot of engagements and activities, collaborations that are going to evolve from there.
Beautiful.
And that way you don't feel alone. You don't feel like, oh, nobody's listening to me, or nobody even feels the pulse and the weight and the potential of my idea.
Beautiful.
And so that creates a lot of ripple effect in terms of how we engage, how we collaborate, and how we partner with each other to do future work.
Beautiful. Just 2 more questions and then we'll be wrapping up here. The first question would be that just a little bit more insight into how BiNTA is going to run. Oh, by the way, before I move on, I particularly appreciate the fact that the BIL is considering incorporating these people into a community of practice so that there is consistency even after each of the fellowship sessions. Things are happening, they are part of the conversations, capacity can continue to be strengthened, and a lot more can happen. That's a way to go. So 2 questions, like I said earlier. The first question here would be that just a little bit more insight. So how is the BiNTA fellowship structured? How will the fellows receive their trainings? Is it going to be on-site, a combination of on-site, off-site? What is it going to be like briefly as we wrap up?
Okay, so it's going to be hybrid.
Yeah.
So first, once you are selected, you are going to be onboarded, and that onboarding process will mean that you would have to interface with critical players in the field who you probably will look up to. At the onboarding, you would also be introduced to mentors with whom you are going to have coaching calls all through the life of not just the design, but the implementation of your change-making idea.
Yeah.
And so after the onboarding, then we give you opportunities to interact with our learning management system so that even if you're agreeing on, you wouldn't have any excuse as per not knowing or not being grounded in terms of what corruption is or what behavioral science is. And that's where you can also ask questions. So, but we are also very aware that you may not get answers to all your questions from the learning management system, which is going to be digital. We to that end, we are going to have webinars and Q&A sessions, information sessions for you to interact with us and direct your questions at expert faculties drawn from around the world. And that will air out the next phase, which is like you are co-creating your ideas. After having been grounded in the basics of this work now, you are co-creating. Yes, you came into the fellowship with some ideas, but maybe they are not beautiful enough. Maybe they are not perfect. Maybe they are not nested with best practices and insights from behavioral science. We will do that through co-creation meetings.
Yeah.
Each fellow will work in groups, because don't forget that one of our critical goals is engagement.
Yeah.
So each fellow will work in a group with 9 other people, making 10 people working in a team, and they will co-create a winning and befitting ideas that will be implemented. And trust me, BIL is behind them financing the operationalizing of that idea. And so after the co-creation, which will involve coaching calls also with their mentors, they will be given a 6-week duration to implement their change ideas. Of course, that is still flexible right now, but we're looking at a range of between 6 weeks and 3 months for them to implement their change ideas. After which we will now introduce them or inaugurate them into the membership of the Behavioral Insights community of practice, which we're talking about as part of our sustainability plan.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been really insightful, and I believe that a lot of people who are listening to this would want to engage and know more about BiNTA Fellowship and even BIL, that is the Behavioural Innovation Lab, and the PIC, the work that we do. So any final words for anyone listening to this before we wrap it up?
Okay, final words will be that if you just spread the word, even if you think that you are not the direct beneficiary of this, you never can tell whose idea you are fanning to light when you share the news and you share the information, particularly to specific people who you think can benefit from it. That is the first one. The second one is that you should also embrace behavioral insights. I know that we are not quick to change in Nigeria and we just get used to the old things, but it's quite fascinating that behavioral insights can be applied to virtually every part of your life. It's just like project management. And so I will want to really be that advocate that you embrace behavioral insights in whatever field of play that you find yourself in.
And of course, engage the Policy Innovation Center in your efforts to embrace behavioral insights, whatever you do. Thank you so much, Mr. Akinwunmi Akinola. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
We've had a wonderful time listening to you. And to all our audience, thank you so much. All our listeners, thank you so much for your time. We hope and are looking forward to engagements with you, either via BiNTA Fellowship or via other efforts by the PIC to advance the use of behavioral insights in every endeavor of life and in policymaking, and in whichever way that it might be applicable. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to hear from you. Thank you.